My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed. I am 42 years old, with a PhD in art history from Yale and a career my husband, Mark, often patronizingly referred to as adorable. To the outside world, we were the picture-perfect New England suburbanites, a historic home in a Boston suburb, a bright young son named Leo, and a successful husband in finance who could effortlessly name the top 5 Bordeaux vintages but couldn't recall the title of my doctoral dissertation. That dissertation, the work on Renaissance restoration techniques that had consumed 6 years of my life, was simply Evie's cute little project at his dinner parties. I was an adjunct professor at a local community college, sharing my passion with tired-eyed but eager students, while my true talent the ability to restore old canvases, to breathe life back into forgotten beauty atrophied in a spare room above our garage, a space Mark constantly complained smelled of turpentine. My life was built on a foundation of subtle condescension, a kind of slow, odorless poison that was quietly suffocating my soul. It was in the way he'd interrupt me mid-sentence at parties to clarify a point I was making, the way he controlled our joint finances under the guise of simplifying things for you, the way he gave me a designer apron for Christmas, the year he bought himself a Swiss watch. I had become an accessory to his life, a well-educated ornament to be displayed when convenient and put away when not. The collapse didn't come as a roaring hurricane, it came as a death knell on a phone screen. It was a sweltering July afternoon, the heat radiating in waves from the asphalt of the Arrowhead summer camp parking lot. I was there to pick up Leo from his 2-week stay. The air was thick with the laughter of children and the happy calls of parents. I smiled, feeling a simple joy, eager to wrap my arms around my boy and hear about his adventures with archery and canoes. Mark was supposed to be with me, but he'd called 2 days prior. "Honey, an emergency business trip to Barcelona," he'd said, his voice a perfect imitation of regret. "Massive opportunity. I'll be back as soon as I can." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? His deceptions, like his dismissiveness, were always impeccably tailored. While waiting for the last of the campers to be called, I idly scrolled through my phone, and then I saw it. A public post from a lifestyle influencer I was vaguely aware of, only because Mark had once mocked her at a charity event. Her name was Chloe. The photo was from a windswept balcony, the skyline of a stunning European city sprawling behind them. 2 champagne flutes were clinked together in the sunset. And the man holding one of those flutes, wearing the blue linen shirt I'd bought him for our anniversary, was my husband. His hand was on her waist. His smile, the one I thought was reserved for me and our son, was radiant for an entirely different reason. But it was the caption that was the knife straight to the heart, the one that twisted and broke off. Starting our new life in the city of dreams. Number Barcelona bound. Number no regrets. Number true love. My world shattered into a million pixels on a 5.5-inch screen. The air left my lungs. All around me, happy families were reuniting, but I was frozen in a silent, horrifying bubble. The loudspeaker calling Leo Reed sounded like it was coming from a great distance. I snapped my head up, forcing a smile onto my numb lips as my 8-year-old son ran toward me, his face freckled and glowing with joy. "Mom, where's Dad?" he asked, throwing his arms around my waist. I held him tight, breathing in the smell of campfire smoke and sunscreen in his hair. "Dad had to go away for work, sweetie," I said, my voice dangerously unsteady. "It's just you and me." The drive home was the longest of my life. Leo chattered endlessly about kayaks and camp songs while I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, fighting waves of nausea and a grief so profound it felt physical. Every traffic light, every suburban home we passed, felt like a monument to the fraudulent life I had been living. When we arrived, the silence of the house greeted us like an omen. I knew. Even before I walked upstairs, I knew what I would find. His side of the closet was eerily empty. The expensive suits, the crisp shirts, the Italian shoes all gone. All that remained was what he hadn't deemed worthy of taking, a few old t-shirts, a pair of worn-out sneakers, and the sweater my late grandmother had knit for him. On our perfectly made bed, where we had slept beside each other just nights before, was a single white envelope. My name was written in his hurried script. Inside wasn't a letter of love or apology. It was a short, cold, typewritten note informing me he had filed for divorce. Our marriage, he wrote, had been over for a long time. And beneath that line was the business card of his lawyer, a glossy, expensive name from a top-tier firm in downtown Boston. That was the moment I realized I hadn't just been betrayed. I had been erased. He didn't just leave me, he meticulously planned my demolition while I was busy being a mother, picking up our child from summer camp. The cruelty of it, the cold calculation, left me with no more tears to cry. Instead, something else began to form in the rubble of my heart, a cold, quiet fire. A resolve as hard as steel. He thought I was a cute little project. He thought I was weak, dependent, a canary in his gilded cage. He had made a catastrophic miscalculation. He had forgotten what my dissertation was truly about, not just art restoration, but about finding the hidden masterpiece beneath centuries of dirt and neglect. That night, after tucking Leo into bed, promising him that everything would be okay, I went to the room above the garage. The smell of turpentine and old canvas welcomed me like a long-lost friend. I flipped on the lights, illuminating the dusty easels, the stacks of art books, and a half-finished painting I had abandoned months ago. In the silence of that room, I made a vow. He had started a new life in Barcelona. I was about to begin my greatest restoration yet. The restoration of Dr. Evelyn Reed. And the final result would be a masterpiece he could never afford to even get close to again. The war had just begun. The initial shock quickly gave way to a harsher reality. Warfare. Mark didn't just want a divorce, he wanted to annihilate me. Days after the Barcelona post, an email arrived from my bank. Our joint account, the one that held every penny of our savings and my meager adjunct salary, was frozen. A cold legal notice stated that all assets were being assessed in divorce proceedings. He had already siphoned off the majority of the funds, leaving only a few $1,000s, and now even that was out of my reach. The mortgage payment, the utility bills, the credit cards all were due. I had a few $100s in cash in my wallet and a full tank of gas. Panic rose like a cold tide. This was no longer about a broken heart, it was a crisis of survival. He knew exactly what he was doing. By cutting me off financially, he was trying to force me into accepting whatever miserable settlement his lawyer offered. He wanted me desperate. In my first moment of that desperation, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my mentor, Dr. Alistair Finch. Alistair was a living legend in the art history world, a man in his 70s with sharp eyes that could see through layers of varnish to the soul of a painting. He was the one who had seen the potential in me as a nervous graduate student, and he had never let me forget it. Evelyn, his deep, warm voice came through the phone, instantly calming a fraction of my panic. "It's been too long. Is everything all right, my dear?" And I broke. I told him everything Barcelona, Chloe, the frozen bank account, the raw humiliation of it all. I expected pity. Instead, I got rage. "That bastard," Alistair growled, and I could picture his silver beard bristling with indignation. "He thinks he can treat one of my finest students like this? Evelyn, you listen to me. Stop crying. Tears don't pay the bills. You have a world-class mind and a pair of hands other restorers would kill for. We are going to use them." That conversation was like a shot of adrenaline to my soul. It was a reminder that I was not Mark's wife. I was Dr. Evelyn Reed. Galvanized by Alistair's fire, I sprang into action. First step, legal help. I couldn't possibly afford a lawyer like Mark's, but I remembered Sarah, an old friend from grad school who'd become a fiery family law attorney. She didn't work for a big firm, but she was brilliant and tenacious. When I met Sarah in her small office, she looked at the business card of Mark's lawyer and whistled. "He's hired a shark, Evie. This guy specializes in gutting suburban wives. They're going to try to paint you as an unstable, financially incompetent academic who can't provide for her son." "But I have a PhD," I started. "To them, that's worse," Sarah cut in. "It makes you seem out of touch. They'll say your degree was an expensive hobby that Mark funded. They will turn your greatest strength into a weakness. So, we have to be smarter. Sarah and I mapped out a strategy. While she fought the legal motions to get some of my own money released for living expenses, my job was to prove my viability. I needed a job. A real job, not the precarious, low-paying adjunct positions. I sent out dozens of applications to museums and universities. The responses were a steady chorus of rejection. Your experience is impressive, but we're looking for someone with more recent administrative experience, or the position has been filled. Doors I thought would be open were slammed shut. My career had been put on the back burner for years to prioritize marks and raising Leo. Now I was paying the price. Desperate, I took on 2 more adjunct jobs at different colleges across the state, creating a frantic, exhausting schedule. I was up at 5 a.m., making breakfast and packing lunch for Leo, driving an hour to my first class, then racing across the city to a second afternoon class, getting home just in time to pick Leo up from after-school care. Evenings were a blur of grading papers and preparing lectures. I was running on coffee and fear. I sold some of my own jewelry pieces from my parents, not from Mark Doe pay for gas and groceries. We went from organic steaks to pasta and jarred sauce. That's when the real challenge came. Mark's lawyer filed for primary custody, citing my unstable lifestyle and unreliable income. They were using the very work schedule his actions had forced upon me to argue I was too busy to be a proper mother. The vicious irony almost broke me. He created the crisis, and now he was using it to try and take my son. In a preliminary hearing, Mark's lawyer, a perfectly dressed woman with a smile as cold as a morgue slab, spoke of my PhD as if it were an illness. "Your Honor," she said, her voice dripping with false pity, "Dr. Reed is a scholar, no doubt. But running a household requires practicality, not theory." While my client was building a solid career to provide for his family, Dr. Reed was pursuing her academic hobbies. I felt the blood rush to my face. I wanted to scream that those academic hobbies taught me discipline, perseverance, and the ability to see value where others see only decay. But I followed Sarah's instructions and remained silent, my heart hammering against my ribs. I hit rock bottom that night, sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot, with only $27 in my newly partially unfrozen bank account. I put my head on the steering wheel and sobbed. Not quiet tears, but ragged, painful sobs that racked my body. I felt defeated, humiliated, and terrified. Right then, my phone rang. It was Alistair. "Evelyn," he said, as if sensing my despair through the phone lines. "I have something for you. But it is not for the faint of heart. Are you ready for a real fight?" "I have nothing left to lose, Alistair," I whispered. "Good," he said. "Because this could be a chance to gain everything. Listen closely. Do you know of the Harrington collection?" I did. Every art historian did. It was a mythical private art collection amassed by a wealthy industrialist family in the early 20th century and locked away in their rural Massachusetts estate for over 50 years. It was rumored to hold lost masterpieces, but no one knew for sure. "The family is finally opening it to the public," Alistair continued, his voice electric with excitement. "They're establishing a foundation, and they need a chief curator and head restorer to assess, restore, and prepare the collection for a grand exhibition. They need someone with deep academic knowledge and hands-on skill. They need you, Evelyn." I put your name forward. My heart stopped. It was the job of a lifetime. A fantasy. "But Alistair," I said, cold reality crashing back in. "How can I? I'm in the middle of a war. I have no money. I told them that," he interrupted. "I told them you were in a fight and that you were a fighter. I told them the same dedication you have for art is the dedication you would bring to this project. They want to meet you. Next week." When I hung up the phone, the tears of despair had dried. A new, trembling sensation was spreading through me. It was hope, but it was more than that. It was a chance to turn the taunts of Mark and his lawyer into ash. They called me a dreamy academic. I was about to show them what a dreamer could build. I started my car, but instead of driving home, I drove to my studio above the garage. I turned on all the lights. This time, the space didn't look neglected, it looked like an arsenal. I picked up a small paintbrush, feeling its familiar balance in my hand. The fight for my son and my financial stability was far from over. But now, a new front had opened. A front where I wasn't the victim, but the expert. A front where my PhD wasn't a liability, but my most powerful weapon. The Harrington Estate was hidden behind old stone walls and a line of ancient oaks, a world apart from my earthbound worries. As I drove through the wrought iron gates, I felt like I was entering another time. The house itself was a monster of granite and ivy, magnificent and intimidating. It had been silent for decades, a ghost ship filled with treasure. The interview was unlike any I'd ever had. Instead of a board of suits, I was met by Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the granddaughter of the original collector. She was a woman in her 80s, physically small but with an unshakable presence, her pale blue eyes having seen nearly a century of history. She didn't ask about my resume or my management experience. Instead, she led me through the dust-sheeted rooms, where paintings were shrouded in white cloths like ghosts. "Dr. Reed," she said, her voice clear and precise. "Dr. Finch tells me you can hear paintings speak. Tell me what these are saying to you." For the next 2 hours, we went from room to room. I didn't hold back. I let my love and my knowledge pour out. I pointed to a darkened portrait and explained why the yellowed varnish indicated it had hung over a coal-burning fireplace for decades. I examined a landscape and identified the brushwork of a lesser-known Hudson River school artist, just from the way he painted clouds. I knelt by a torn still life and described the exact multi-step restoration process it would need to be made whole again. I spoke of the chemical decay of pigments, of the different linen canvases used in 17th century Antwerp, of how an X-ray could reveal sketches hidden beneath the surface. I wasn't speaking as a potential employee trying to impress. I was speaking as a doctor diagnosing a beloved patient. At the end of our tour, Mrs. Vance stopped before a massive, still-shrouded canvas in the main ballroom. "And this one?" she asked. I stepped closer and, with her nod of permission, I carefully lifted a corner of the sheet. Underneath was a chaotic scene of dark, cracked, and peeling forms. It looked hopeless, a ruined relic. But even through the grime, I could see it, a mastery in the composition, a sophistication in the use of light and shadow that had been nearly obliterated. "This was something special," I whispered, almost to myself. "It's been severely damaged. A fire, perhaps, or left in a damp cellar. Most would say it's unsalvageable. And what do you say, Dr. Reed?" I looked Mrs. Vance directly in the eye. "I say that underneath all of this, there's a masterpiece waiting to be liberated. It will take thousands of hours. It will take patience and science and a bit of faith. But it's there. I can feel it." A rare, faint smile touched Mrs. Vance's lips. "So can I," she said. "The job is yours. If you want it." On the drive home, I felt a dizzying sense of elation. But reality soon crashed in. The job was all-consuming, meaning I'd have to give up my 3 adjunct positions. The salary the foundation offered was generous, but it wouldn't start until I officially began, and the paperwork would take weeks. In the meantime, I was still financially precarious, and the custody battle was raging. This was a gamble. A monumental one. I was betting my future, and my son's, on my ability to turn a promise into a reality. When I told Sarah about the job, she was brutally pragmatic. "This is a double-edged sword, Evie. Mark's lawyer will spin this. She's quitting 3 stable jobs to chase a fantasy project in a crumbling mansion. They'll make it sound like you're abandoning your son for a pipe dream." Then we changed the narrative, I said, a new hardness in my voice. "This isn't a pipe dream. This is the most prestigious post in my field in New England. We won't call it a project. We will call it the position of Chief Curator and Head of Restoration at the Harrington Foundation." In our next hearing, we did just that. When Mark's lawyer tried to mock my new job, Sarah masterfully countered. She presented the official offer letter, stressing the prestige of the Harrington Foundation. She called Dr. Alistair Finch as an expert witness who spoke of the project's significance and my unique qualifications to lead it. "Your Honor," Alistair said, his voice resonating in the courtroom, "entrusting Dr. Reed with the Harrington collection is like entrusting the Boston Symphony Orchestra to a world-class conductor. It is not a hobby. It is a recognition of elite talent." For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in the eyes of Mark's lawyer. The judge, a weary-looking man, was starting to listen more intently. Ultimately, the court reached a compromise. I was permitted to take the job, but temporary custody would be split, and I had to prove that this new job provided a stable environment for Leo. That meant I had to move. My tiny rental apartment was over an hour from the Harrington Estate. With a small personal loan from Sarah and a salary advance from the foundation, I found a little rental house in a quiet town just 15 minutes from the estate. It was far smaller than our suburban home, but it was cozy. It was ours. For the first time in months, Leo had a backyard to play in. The next 2 years were a blur of intense focus. My life narrowed to two things: Leo and the collection. By day, I was a scientist and an artist. I set up a state-of-the-art restoration lab in one of the estate's wings. I spent hours peering through microscopes, analyzing pigments. I meticulously cleaned away centuries of grime from canvases, 1 square centimeter at a time. I wielded solvents and scalpels with the precision of a surgeon. By night, I was a mother. I did homework with Leo, read to him at bedtime, and listened to his stories about school and friends. The days he was with Mark were the hardest, the silence in our little house a constant reminder of what I was fighting for. The work on the large, mysterious painting in the ballroom was my ultimate challenge. It became my obsession. After months of careful cleaning, the forms began to emerge more clearly. It was a mythological scene, full of drama and emotion. But the signature was lost in a badly damaged area. One night, working late under the fluorescent lights, I used infrared reflectography, a technique that can see through the top layers of paint. And then I saw it. Hidden beneath a clumsy, centuries-old repair patch was a faint signature. A signature I had only ever seen in textbooks. Artemisia Gentileschi. One of the greatest female painters of the Baroque period, a woman who channeled personal trauma and societal misogyny into some of the most powerful and emotional art of her time. I stepped back from the monitor, my heart racing. This wasn't just a lost masterpiece. This was an unknown Artemisia Gentileschi. Its value was immeasurable, both financially and historically. It was like finding a lost play by Shakespeare. I spent the next several weeks meticulously verifying my discovery, consulting with other experts through discreet channels. When the consensus was confirmed, I knew I was sitting on a bombshell that would rock the art world. All this time, Mark and Chloe remained in Barcelona, living their glossy life on her Instagram feed. His lawyer continued to send harassing motions, but they had lost their teeth. I had stable, prestigious employment. I was rebuilding my life. Slowly, the balance of power was shifting. As the restoration of the collection neared completion, the Harrington Foundation began planning a massive launch gala. It would be the collection's unveiling to the world after more than half a century. Critics, collectors, and art world luminaries from around the globe were invited. And the star of the evening, they insisted, would be me. I would be the one to pull back the curtain on the Gentileschi masterpiece. They wanted me to give a speech. As I sat down to write that speech, I didn't think about art history. I thought about that sweltering afternoon at Arrowhead Camp. I thought about the empty closet and the cold divorce notice. I thought about the sleepless nights, the fear and the humiliation. And I thought about the process of restoration, not just of the painting, but of myself. They wanted me to talk about art. But I was going to talk about survival. The night of the gala, the air in the Harrington Estate crackled with anticipation. Crystal chandeliers sparkled over a sea of black-tie guests, the pop of champagne corks, and an excited murmur echoing through the grand halls. I stood in the wings of the stage, looking out at the crowd. 2 years ago, I was crying in a grocery store parking lot. Tonight, I was about to unveil a lost masterpiece to the world. The contrast was dizzying. Leo was there, looking impossibly grown up in a small suit, sitting in the front row with Alistair and Sarah. Seeing him, proud and happy, was all the validation I needed. Mrs. Vance introduced me, her voice ringing with pride. And now, the woman without whom none of this would be possible. The woman whose vision, skill, and heart brought life back into these walls. Please welcome Dr. Evelyn Reed. As I walked onto the stage and into the spotlight, a hush fell over the room. I took a deep breath, looked out at the expectant faces. And then, I saw him. Mark. He was standing at the back of the room, near the bar. He wasn't the tanned, smug man from the Barcelona photos. He looked thinner, paler. His suit seemed a little too big for him. Beside him was Chloe, who was looking around the room with a mixture of envy and insecurity. Their dream life had clearly met with reality. The rumors Sarah had heard were true. Mark's risky investments had failed, and Chloe's influencer bubble had burst. They were back in the States, not in triumph, but in retreat. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. I saw shock in his, followed by an unreadable flicker, maybe regret, maybe envy. I gave him nothing. I simply turned away and began my speech. Good evening, I started, my voice clear and strong. We are here tonight to celebrate art, to admire beauty. But I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about ruin. A soft murmur went through the crowd. Every painting in this collection, I continued, came to us in a state of damage. Neglected. Obscured by dirt and apathy. Some were torn, some were peeling, some were nearly unrecognizable. They are reminders that everything, even the most beautiful things, can be broken. Everything can be brought to ruin. I flicked my eyes toward the back of the room. Mark was motionless, his drink in his hand. The art of restoration is not about erasing that damage. It's not about pretending the cracks were never there. It is a far more honest process. It's about meticulously cleaning away the grime to find the true color beneath. It's about reinforcing the structure so it can stand on its own again. And sometimes, as with the masterpiece we are about to unveil, it involves using advanced tools to see through the surface layers and discover the glorious truth that has been hidden from view. I paused, letting the words sink in. 2 years ago, my own life was in a similar state. It was in ruins, obscured by deceit and loss. There were moments when I thought it was unsalvageable. But what this process has taught me, both in the lab and in life, is that the cracks are not necessarily a weakness. Sometimes, they are how the light gets in. They are what allow you to rebuild something stronger, more authentic, and infinitely more valuable than what you had before. Tonight, we are honored to reintroduce the world to a lost masterpiece by one of history's most resilient artists, Artemisia Gentileschi. A woman who turned her trauma into power and injustice into immortal art. With a gesture, the red velvet curtain behind me was drawn, revealing the fully restored painting of Judith beheading Holofernes. It was glorious, powerful. The image of Judith, determined and steady, exacting justice on the Assyrian general, was a statement of female triumph over tyranny. A stunned silence fell over the room, followed by a roar of thunderous applause. It was my moment. The moment I redefined myself, not for Mark, but for the world, and most importantly, for myself. After the speech, I was mobbed. Critics wanted interviews, collectors wanted to shake my hand. But I only searched for one face in the crowd. Leo ran up and threw his arms around me. "You are awesome, Mom," he yelled. It was the only applause that truly mattered. Later, as the crowd thinned, Mark approached me. Chloe hovered awkwardly a few feet away. "Evie," he began, his voice quiet, stripped of its usual confidence. "That was unbelievable. You did all this." "I did," I said simply, my tone neutral. There was no anger, just a peaceful distance. "Listen," he said, taking a step closer. "I made a terrible mistake. Barcelona. It was a disaster. I lost everything. I held up my hand, a small but definitive gesture. Mark, don't. This isn't about you anymore. Your story and my story no longer intersect. But we have Leo, he said, a last-ditch effort to find common ground. Yes, we do, I said, and for the first time, I smiled at him, but it wasn't a smile he knew. And he will get to see his mother as a woman who built an empire from the ashes his father left behind. That will be my legacy to him. Now, if you'll excuse me, Mrs. Vance and I have a new foundation to discuss. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there amidst the splendor I had created. I didn't look back. The sweetest revenge wasn't his destruction, but my own magnificent creation. He didn't lose everything in Barcelona. He lost everything the moment he underestimated the woman he left behind in a summer camp parking lot. Weeks later, the Harrington Foundation, with a generous endowment from Mrs. Vance, officially launched the Phoenix Reed Grant. It was a fellowship designed to help mid-career professionals, especially women, rebuild their lives after a personal or professional crisis. My story had become the foundation for something larger than myself. I won primary custody. Our little house no longer felt temporary, it was a sanctuary. My lab at the Harrington Estate was my kingdom. I didn't just restore art, I was shaping its future. My annual income now far surpassed what Mark had made even in his best days, but the number had become irrelevant. The real wealth was autonomy. It was peace. It was the ability to look in the mirror and see a masterpiece in progress. Lessons and philosophies for life. From the ashes of betrayal and ruin, I learned lessons not found in any textbook, philosophies forged not in ink, but in fire. 1. True worth is not found in the validation of others, but in profound self-awareness. Asterisk. For years, I measured my value through my husband's lens. I was an adorable hobby, a cute little project. His departure, however cruel, was an unintentional gift. It forced me to conduct my own appraisal. The collapse stripped away all external metrics, leaving only one core question. Who am I when no one else is defining me? The answer was found in the smell of turpentine, in the patience of restoration, in the sound of my own reclaimed voice. True success is not when the world validates you, but when you can look yourself in the mirror and recognize the person looking back without needing any approval at all. The cracks are not a sign of weakness, but proof of resilience. Asterisk. A restored painting doesn't hide its cracks, it integrates them into its history, making it more unique and precious. So it is with life. Our traumas, our failures, our heartbreaks will often try to hide them, to pretend they don't exist. But it is through those very cracks that the light of resilience, wisdom, and empathy can shine. Do not be ashamed of your scars. They are not a sign that you were broken, they are a sign that you survived. Build your chosen family. Asterisk. The family we are born into is an accident of fate, but the family we choose are friends, our mentors, our kindred spirits is a deliberate act of love and survival. When my traditional family structure imploded, it was my chosen family Alistair, Sarah who became my scaffolding. They lent me their strength when I had none of my own. They believed in me even when I doubted myself. Nurture these relationships. They are the safety net that will catch you when you fall and the choir that will sing of your victories. 4. Expertise is a form of untouchable power. Asterisk. Mark could freeze my bank account, but he couldn't take my PhD. He could leave me, but he couldn't erase the 6 years I spent studying the Renaissance masters. In a world where so much can be taken away, money, property, relationships, your knowledge, your skills, and your expertise are permanent assets. Invest in yourself. Be a lifelong learner. Become so good they can't ignore you. Real power isn't your bank balance, it's the value you can create. 5. The sweetest revenge is not your enemy's destruction, but your own magnificent creation. Asterisk. The desire for vengeance is a natural emotion, but it is a prison. It keeps you tethered to the past and to the person who hurt you. True liberation comes not from watching them fail, but from being so consumed with building your own success that you no longer have time to look back. Your indifference is the final blow. When their existence becomes irrelevant to your happiness, you have truly won. Don't build a pyre for them, build a palace for yourself. Your brilliant existence will be all the shade they ever need. In the end, my story is not about a divorce. It is about a restoration. It is proof that from the most painful fragments, we can not only rebuild, we can create a version of ourselves more beautiful, more powerful, and infinitely more valuable than ever before. And that is a masterpiece worth fighting for.